How's it going, Doom Patrollers? Welcome to a brand new Doom Patrol review and breakdown. And I know I'm already starting this video sad. It's just because it's for the finale. This was the finale. It wasn't supposed to be the finale, and I'll talk a little bit later, I suppose, at the end of this review in terms of my overall consensus of this episode and how it felt as a finale compared to that of if we were going to get an episode 10, which we were meant to. But, you know, overall, I still very much so enjoyed this episode. It really does beg the question of a season 3. We really, really need that. But I feel like for what they had and what they did in this episode, with it being episode 9, it did leave a very, very interesting place to pick up for another season. And I'm not gonna say anything else. I just want to get straight into this. So, of course, guys, like this video if you enjoyed the finale. And just to show your support for the channel, thank you all so much for the support as usual all season long. And of course, subscribe for more off-season Doom Patrol content with the latest news updates and anything we get with regards to another season. So this episode picks up kind of right where we left off, with Jane having been tossed in the well by Miranda. And my god, I really want to get to the big reveals, but trust me, we will. This flashback started in Wisconsin 1969, where we got to see Jane, or should I say this wasn't Jane, let's just refer to her as Miranda. As I said in my breakdown, when Miranda escaped from the well, she went off into the world, and all of the personalities were just looking out for Kay Chalice as of that moment. So it was really pleasantly surprising getting to see Miranda quite a few years later, obviously at the age of whatever Jane or Miranda looks like in present day, but she's been working in a sandwich factory, and yeah, this musician was essentially hitting on her and wanted to take her to a bar. They wanted to go on a date, and this was nice to see. Like, it's just Jane living her life way before she actually got captured and taken to that place where she got infused with the Dominator gene bomb in the freaking needle. But it's a little bit different from the comics. But either way, this was a very, very interesting way to see things unfold. I never thought we would see Jane in her everyday life before meeting the Doom Patrol and stuff like that. Now, the flashbacks of this do continue on side by side, but I want to save the big chunks until a little bit later. As for the other part of the episode, where that picked up was with Cliff, of course. If you guys remember the last episode, he was invited to his daughter's wedding. And, you know, stories like this made things all the more apparent that obviously we were meant to get another episode, because Cliff was choosing out all of these t-shirts that Jane had picked for him to go to the wedding for Clara. But, you know, lo and behold, the Candlemaker threat was very much surreal this episode, obviously. And this added a very interesting dilemma for Cliff, because he hasn't been there for his daughter this whole time. Now a big world-ending apocalyptic event is happening, but, you know, I kind of really did understand where Cliff was coming from. I liked how Larry was like, but, you know, who are we? You know, he was mentioning that in terms of family, because Cliff was like, well, I need to be there for my family. That brought up a bigger spectrum of, well, aren't the Doom Patrol his family? What about Dorothy? But to be honest, you know, if Cliff has been waiting his whole existence, you know, like that montage in episode 1, just staring out the window for decades. Obviously, he did move between it, but my point is, I don't blame him for not wanting to sort out the Candlemaker problem because of the absolute threat that is upsetting his daughter, Clara, by not being there. So it would have been amazing to see how this went into episode 10, because that episode was originally and has been written by Shoshana Sashi, the story editor of Doom Patrol, and I would have loved to have seen what she had planned for that final episode, but it looks like that could be self-cannibalized into episode 1 of the following season, season 3. If we get a season 3, we better get a season 3, but you see what I mean. This isn't the only TV show affected, but usually in a situation like this, similar to The Flash, some of you who may watch that, they're self-cannibalizing those last few episodes into the first couple of episodes of season 7. So it might be a similar situation. That is if we get another season. But ultimately, Cliff did feel compelled to help out, but it was just kind of tough. Like, it was so fulfilling seeing him come full circle, get that relationship with his daughter back up and running again, but now he can't even attend her wedding. So that really was kind of tough to watch, because I'm a big Cliff Steele fan. Alongside this, picking up from the end of last episode, unfortunately we didn't have Ronnie in this episode. I expect maybe we would have had her in episode 10. I feel like this review is going to be a bit of, oh, what would have happened in episode 10 kind of thing, because this obviously wasn't the original cliffhanger ending for the season. Victor is laying in bed listening to love songs. It's the only thing that makes him feel better, but this is where just, you know, everything came to a immediate halt. Like, you know, Herschel came in and he was like, we need to help out You need to help out Dorothy. Candlemaker's going ham at the frickin' fair. So when they arrived, the fair was covered in wax, even more than when we saw at the end of last episode. This was pretty funny. I know a lot of you were mentioning, and I totally forgot to mention it, I did think it as well, that this fair does feel kind of similar to the whole Titan Season 2 ending scene, because that was at a fair as well. I wouldn't be surprised, and this isn't a confirmation if they used the same place. I have no idea. It just does look similar. Then they saw Kipling, and that was absolutely hilarious because he's all beaten up and he's like, this is just like, this is not gonna happen. Like, you're not gonna fix things. Run and save your own lives, because the Candlemaker has hijacked Dorothy's imagination and it's summoned imaginary friends to do its, his own bidding, Candlemaker's own bidding. But not like just imaginary friends of Dorothy's, but everyone's. Like the Doom Patrol's Kipling's, and Kipling's turned out to be a freaking Punch and Judy puppet, and he was just getting dragged away and beaten up by so this I found it an interesting take, because Candlemaker could absolutely decimate anyone. He doesn't have to get other little puppets or imaginary friends conjured from your own mind to do his bidding for him. If he really wanted to, he could just mess everyone up just like he did Baby Doll and Flaming Katie. So, I'm not saying I'm disappointed. It's just, it's a funny take. And I imagine that's why they did it, to provide, because these moments did provide for hilarious moments throughout the episode, especially each of their own imaginary friends, such as freaking Jesus for Cliff Steele. In this moment, Miranda collapses. Essentially, the other personalities pulled the alarm, which just brings back the primary into the underground. I kind of love that feature as well. They questioned her for going to the fairground. Is this really in the best interest of the girl? And also just that Jane would think before going there, in terms of the Candlemaker, of which they're terrified of. Because if you think about it, Miranda has just launched them all into a situation of which they're petrified of because of the death of Flaming Katie and Baby Doll. Like, that's like the last place they want to be. This is where Miranda kind of flexes that she knows what Kay wants, which is where we kind of see Kay in a very, very quick scene where it looks like she's heading somewhere. And I knew from that second, like, we were going to revisit Kay and much, much later for that bombshell moment. So as I said, the hilarious moments from the Candlemaker, as I said, not necessarily the apocalyptic kind of thing I expected. It felt very downscaled compared to what you would imagine. But then again, this could have, as I've already discussed, bled over to the 10th episode. So I will say this does feel very small scale for what this apocalyptic, this insanely powerful being could do. Why is he effing around with the characters at the fair? It feels like there is more to this, and that's why I'm trusting in the process of there was more to this in episode 10. But it was still funny. For example, Rita finds her imaginary friend, Mademoiselle Roxy. It's been 90 years. For Vic, he finds Dr. Cowboy, who is really Silas in the cowboy suit, his dad. That was funny as well, of course. And I like the stories they all had behind this. Doom Patrol always finds a really decent, complex way of diving into even something as trivial and funny as freaking imaginary friends. So for Rita, she stopped seeing that imaginary friend because of the things her mother was doing, and she used a picture of her mother's eyes on the freaking imaginary friend so she can no longer see that imaginary friend. But then when you have Victor, he wanted advice about Ronnie, but this imaginary friend, the imaginary friend of a kid version of Victor, will just always wants affirmation. Think about it. A kid who invents an imaginary friend because they're going through a rough time, or they just want to, bitch about their problems to their imaginary friend. Or obviously the imaginary friend is always going to cater to the kid and not side with the parents. But of course, my favorite one was Jesus from Cliff Steele. That was just absolutely hilarious, finding out that Cliff went to summer Bible camp or whatever it was. And with Jesus, he was infuriated with Cliff because he ditched him way back then and referred to him as a Judas, of course. He was hiding from him in the bull pit, but they eventually kind of reconciled. Ultimately, as I said, this was hilarious, but Cliff lost his freaking arm in the process, his eye, all of this at the same time. There's a lot of, coinciding scenes going on, and it's kind of hard to articulate it as all of these things are happening in the episode. In this review, if you will. But we had Dorothy, who was being taunted by the Candlemaker because she was trying to hold him back. So by this point, since the Doom Patrol seemed to be getting on with their imaginary friends and kind of reconciling with them, as I said, Candlemaker then seemed to take over each and every one of them, burst through their freaking eyes, the orange eyes, and then just like Medusa, when Candlemaker looked at them, they turned, well, not to stone, but to wax. And as I said, it's just like, I don't know why Candlemaker would go through this length of, you know, of toying with them when he could just destroy them. And yet another thing, and this is why I want to keep reminding everybody, there is a whole missing episode for context here, and this is why it's quite different to the comic books, because it seems here as if Candlemaker really doesn't actually have all the power. I mean, it seems as though he's presented to be that way, but if you think about it, towards the end of the episode, he was just in that fire. He's not exactly walking around and killing people. And don't forget that Dorothy still has the whole wishes thing. Now, I still don't want to give away what they do in the comic books, but let me just reiterate again that after a certain amount of wishes, that's when the Candlemaker is fully unleashed. Yet we only had so many wishes in this, and considering this is an adaptation, I still don't know if after a certain amount of wishes that was meant to happen in episode 10. The way I thought this would go is that Chief would maybe die in this episode or be dying, and Dorothy was forced to make that final wish which unleashes Candlemaker on the world. But this time round, it just seems that because Dorothy grew older, some kind of trial and tribulation of her people is to stop Candlemaker. But if he really was released in this episode, as I keep repeating, it seems like he would do a lot more than just, I don't know, toy with the Doom Patrol in that fair and Kipling with their imaginary friends, and then eventually when they got on with their imaginary friends, he just turns them to wax. It just seems like something is missing, and maybe that would have been presented in the next episode, and maybe that's because Dorothy would have made things even worse with another wish. I don't know. I just feel like the wishes definitely were presented to be a thing, just like they are in the comics, but the ball was completely dropped on them even before it seemed as though Candlemaker was the big threat. I just thought there would have been a wish factoring into his release. But yeah, again, God knows what happens in episode 10, and I'm saying that as well because Cliff, when he was turned into wax, Jesus threw him through the freaking wall, and his armor, everything just went everywhere, including his face mask, so his brain, like, I don't think Cliff is dead, or any of them are dead, but just looking at the different shards of Cliff that was flying around, like, I don't know how his brain would survive that. Obviously, he's got to be fine in the long run. God knows what was supposed to happen next episode, but yeah, Cliff seemed to have it the worst out of all the Doom Patrol. When they just got turned into wax, Cliff was just in pieces. Now, let's continue talking about Jane. So this felt like, yet again, very nice, but it was completely flipped on its head with the, this started off nicely with them moving into a new place. This was around 2 years after they first met outside the sandwich shop. They're talking about unpacking for this housewarming by Saturday, and I still like the little inclusion of all of these personalities even before, like, Jane even came around, even before the powers, because you saw, like, Miranda looking in the mirror. And don't forget that all of the personalities have a say and have something to say about her whenever the primary will go into a new setting. Like, so they, of course, all have an opinion about her getting a boyfriend, starting a life with him, and it was just nice seeing her look in the mirror and be like, trust me, this is going to be a good thing for all of us, and she promises them that, and maybe it is a good thing at this point in time, because they probably all agreed, because Miranda not only at the time was the primary, but it does seem like a nice setup. She seems happy. Why wouldn't the girl be happy because of that? But my, things change. Now, this is when the housewarming party happens, and this is where things get wild. So after briefly saying hello to a couple of friends who say that the place looks great, Miranda starts to refill Bob's cup with whiskey. I believe his name was Bob, and he tries to kiss her, which is just like, you know, in any standards by today is very WTF, especially if you know the boyfriend who is your friend is just over there. But, you know, this is kind of the 60s, but, like, at the same time, this was very, yeah. Obviously, Miranda recoiled at that. I also like how when she first met her boyfriend, I forgot to mention this, she kind of recoiled as well. Think how much it must have taken Miranda or just all of the personalities to get close in physical contact again. So obviously in a relationship, that is a thing to be taken slowly for somebody who's been abused like Jane's character, or should I say Miranda, or Kay at that point in time. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And that was shown really nicely when they first met each other, but then this scene happened, and you can just tell how alienated, victimized, objectified Miranda is in that moment. She's like really trying to make her boyfriend happy, just really trying to reassure everyone in her mind that this is a good thing for them. And I think out of her blind love for him, you can see the tears in her eyes, but she's agreeing with what Bob is saying, because at this point he's just like, oh, it's cool, it's fine, like, you know, I don't have a problem with it, which completely shocks her. So this is when the group play activity began. I'm not going to show photos because I'm going to be demonetized if I get too in detail here. But this was something very unique, and especially when we saw Miranda like flip from these different personalities. So like all of a sudden, I think Penny Farthing got in the seat when Bob was doing his thing, and then after a couple of other personality changes, I think we ended up at Hammerhead, who was just like, get off me, get the F off me. Really, all of this, guys, as you know, was the origin of Jane. At least I think it was the origin of her taking over as primary. She may have existed as a personality in the underground at the time. I believe she already probably did, but this is where she took over. And all simultaneously in this moment, as the scenes are unfolding, after seeing her father and after she kind of bailed on all of this, she's taken into the underground. We have Hammerhead going mental at her. It's obvious as to why, because it's not like all the personalities want to be in that setting, but to be fair to Miranda, she didn't expect any of that to happen. You do still empathize with her despite her agreeing to go along with it, but that's when, you know, some of Jane's lines after that make that so much more profound, because when Jane's just going ham, shutting everyone down, she obviously kind of comments on the women all being these sheeps, like, is it really what they want kind of thing, and ultimately just kind of ended with that whole, you want crazy, here's crazy, I'm Jane, and that was like a nice ending, and that's where Jane went off, and I guess eventually went to get got abducted and taken to that asylum place, and then eventually got her powers and la-di-da-da. So yeah, weird, wacky, extra emphasis on Miranda's story. Obviously, Kay was not happy. That's obviously how that entwined into the whole reason as to why Jane took over as primary from this moment onwards, because Kay Chalice just slammed the door in her face when she tried to apologize to her. And after this is why she went into the well and basically killed herself. And yeah, it turns out that she actually did kill herself, but we will talk about that in a second. But at this point, so many things are happening at once, so I'll try and talk about them in some kind of logical sense. So at this point, the fair's still all being waxed out. We see Niles dragging across the floor, and I was thinking in this episode as well, I was like, this is the finale, and we've only getting 46 minutes, and there's not been any Timothy Dalton right up until the end. I have to say, like, I would have loved to have seen more, but yet again, we would have if we would have got freaking another episode. Goddamn pandemic. This is when he pulls out a needle, and he's trying to find Dorothy, and he's really trying to get her to come to him, and the whole reason being is that needle was probably gonna kill her. He didn't want to do it, but like in his mind, and I guess like the threat of the Candlemaker being this potentially apocalyptic ending, he was dragging himself, and this was so emotional. I love this scene. Dorothy was coming towards her father, but before obviously she could reach him and maybe inject her with some kind of drug that would have shut her body down or something, that's when her mother appeared. And Slava says, you cannot wait any longer, child. This is what I mean. It seems like it's some kind of trial or tribulation as a coming of age thing for her people. I'm not completely nailed down on this in terms of knowing what it's about, but at least it seems to be some kind of thing like that. I felt very bad for Dorothy because as she's like traveling towards Niles, she looks left and right and sees everyone waxed over. For all she knows, they're dead, and she feels so responsible for all of this. And yet again, we can't forget, what is this season about? Kind of growing up for some characters and moving on. And for Dorothy, this was the personification of that. Like when she's like, it's okay, Papa, and you see her, face the Candlemaker. Abigail Shapiro just killed it in this scene. We did have Niles having a go at Slava, of course, saying that she unleashed this thing against her own daughter. And we have Slava saying, well, are you a little girl or are you a woman? So yet again, there is no real proper understanding to this because there's something to do with their tribe. And I don't think we're going to get an explanation. Maybe we would have in the next episode. But just like me, you, or Niles, we're just like, why would you do this? What is this about? But I don't think we're meant to understand fully yet. Not only was Abigail amazing, but also Timothy Dalton. The absolute hurt in his eyes as well when he's just saying that he knows that Dorothy can't beat them. Look at the others. Look at how he destroyed them. What chance do you think a little girl has? Don't do this, Dorothy. I'm begging you. But Dorothy then's just like, I know what I have to do now. She kind of like conjures her own weapon stuff, if you will, out of her imagination. The music in the background of all of this was just incredible. It was all building up to this big moment. And Dorothy summons the courage this takes to destroy the Candlemaker, while Niles is just reluctantly watching his daughter walk to her death, not a way he would have wanted her to go out, obviously. And Candlemaker just grabs her, like really roughly, like Dorothy gets swept up. You have to imagine, like, we're gonna see, well, I'll talk about that in a second, but Niles is completely broken here. Everyone's assuming that, at least within the episode, episode that Abigail Shapiro's character of Dorothy Spinner is screwed at this point, but really there's probably going to be some big video game boss battle in whatever interdimensional weirdy kind of space Candlemaker has taken her to, because as he said, come now child, meet your fate or destiny or whatever he said. What made me very happy about this ultimate moment with the Candlemaker is that it makes me believe that if we get a season 3, providing we do, assuming we do, there's no reason why we shouldn't, but you know how it goes sometimes, Abigail Shapiro would be in it. I'm a big fan of her character. This is completely unresolved. Obviously, we were meant to get a whole other episode. I know I've repeated that so many times, but please don't forget before commenting, throwing any kind of criticism, that we were meant to get a whole other episode. I mean, I'm sure all of you realize that in some ways, at least this is a cliffhanger to leave it off on, right? I think that's one thing, one silver lining that you can take out of this ending. And I know I'll talk about the Jane stuff in a second, but no matter what, we don't know what's going to happen. Oh, what's happened to Dorothy, Candlemaker? And that's quite a good place to leave it off at. It could have been much worse, just like other shows. Like, for example, the Flash finale was insanely, oh, okay. I suppose there's some kind of cliffhanger to it, but it wasn't nearly as good as this. But evidently there was meant to be another episode, another potential 50 plus minutes that we don't get. Unfortunately, it just is a reality of the situation we faced with them only having 2 days of filming left, and as a result of that, not being able to finish the episode for the finale. So they did film some things, but obviously they couldn't, dot all the I's and cross all the T's for that final product to be delivered in season finale episode 10. But for me, I'm happy with it. I just more wanted to, I wish I could see episode 10 to answer some of the points I made about why would Candlemaker just F with the Doom Patrol with, imaginary friends when he has this untapped power. How does this relate into the wishes they were brought in this season? Are they more significant like they are in a comic book? Was another wish still yet to be made that would have made things even more explosive? I know they kind of linked that part of the comic book storyline to Dorothy maturing, but there's still all of these unresolved questions, but I don't mind it because I know the reality of the situation, and for what it is and for what it's worth and for what I saw, I was still very, very, very happy. It's just a bittersweet situation given the inevitable issues that were faced during production. But let's talk about Crazy Jane. So whilst all of this was happening, we saw Jane wake up. We saw her wake up and she was like swimming to that well light. I don't know how she's going to climb up the well. Maybe the rope's still there. I can't remember if it is. Either way, that would have been shown in the following episode. But the cliffhanger that would have led into episode 10, the real finale, was when Kay Chalice, as I mentioned earlier, we saw that she was going to go off somewhere. She goes to Jane's station and lo and behold, oh, Jane's station is closed. This is where Miranda comes to Kay at Jane's closed station. Whilst this is happening, Jane finds a little necklace that Miranda's boyfriend gave to her, that obviously when Miranda threw herself into the well all that time ago, the first time she did it, she would have been down there, the necklace would have been down there, and when she grabs the necklace, the body comes up. So it still evidently shows you don't get reborn in there, you die. Just like what I thought, but I didn't necessarily think that happened with Miranda, and I'll get into this in a second. So, but it turns out she has been dead that whole time. She genuinely did kill herself, which is really sad if you think about it. After trying to make a good go at primary, I do sympathize with Miranda because she was happy in her life. It would have been good for all of them and the girl if that guy wasn't such a jerk and they did lead a happy couple life, if you know what I mean. And after that, she returned to the underground to just see everyone just kind of looking at her being kind of you suck, and she went off and ended herself. And that's actually really sad if you think about it. But the thing I'm not so sure how to feel is the big reveal. So the big reveal was sweet baby. Kay was terrified because this personality that's come out of the well was her father. Now, I shot that down in previous videos, and I've seen people comment now because it's the most bog standard thing. Some people, I thought it's very predictable, but it was almost too predictable to the point of where I didn't think that would happen, but also I didn't think it would work because I saw some people point this out as well. Just like my first reaction is, although I do have a defense for it, I try and counterbalance what I can. So I first find it kind of weird that Kay Chalice, just like real, split personalities, fair enough. That's completely believable, loads of split personalities. But to summon one of your father, that just seems weird. Just the fact that she can be her father, there's no supernatural-esque element to that, really. It's just that she has a personality that is her father without that actually being the soul and existence of her father. This is just a split personality version of her father, I guess, with the likeness of the mannerisms and everything that she knows about her father because, well, Kay grew up with her father. So that's what I'm trying to say is, I didn't think that would work, but at the same time, I do want to point out that if she does know her father, she could in theory simulate that into a personality. And with the mental damage and mental health being so complex, like we can't even begin to question mental health. It's such a complex thing that this is why I do buy it, because, you know, you could argue that with such fractured damage this little girl faced throughout all of her years from the abuse of her father, that one of those personalities could have been invented that mimics her father. It's some kind of self-destructive little node somewhere in her head that was also created despite all of those other cool personalities being made. So I get at face value, just like if you're reacting kind of like me, how I first thought of that. I was like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. That doesn't make sense. Why would a dad be a personality in her? Like, but the mental damage aspect, it actually does make more sense if you kind of look into it that way. So the way I'm choosing to look into this is that it's not actually obviously the dad, because at the end of the day, these are personalities just made up. It's just a personality that is mimicking the dad. You know, it's for all it knows, it is the dad kind of thing. So, you know, I think that's kind of cool. And if you digest it that way, at first I thought Miranda just wanted to even replace Kay. She wanted to be the person. I thought I saw lots of comments like that, and I thought that makes more sense. Maybe Miranda enjoyed being the primary for so long that she's been shutting down all of the other personalities, and she wasn't even going to do it to Kay, the OG personality herself, till she is the only one living with all of these flashbacks. She was living a life with a boyfriend, a place. Maybe she wanted to get back to that. That made more sense to me than doing the dad thing, but the dad thing definitely was a shocker, and it still does make sense. I would love to know your thoughts on that, because yeah, I mean, it's still an interesting thing. I think you can look at it both ways. So I think that is everything we have to talk about. We spoke about how Dorothy went bye-bye to what I imagine is a big boss battle that we would have seen in episode 10 or something or another. Maybe Chief still would have died in episode 10. Maybe another wish would have been made. I have all of those questions that we still have yet to have answers to, obviously. And as for Jane, you know, I imagine that still would have obviously continued in the next episode. She would have got out the well. I'm just wondering where things would have got with that in terms of would she have identified. No, yeah, she definitely would have, because she found the body. So she would have gone up there and be like, who the hell are you? Like, Miranda, this is not Miranda. Her body is down in the well. So who are you? And then maybe we would have seen this massive, awesome, collaborative fight with all of the personalities. So it would have been set in the underground. And we would have had, like, Jane here, Hammerhead here, and all of these other personalities. And maybe they all, like, fought with their powers against the imposter personality, the mimicked version of her father that was created. I think that's a pretty good idea, if I do say so myself. Let me know what you think would have happened with Jane in the next episode, and also Dorothy. No matter what, it's unresolved. We better get a season 3. I do want to encourage you guys to tweet about it on Twitter or any social network or anything like that, because they do listen. Show your support for another season. I'm not saying it's going to be cancelled. It's just, you never know. You never know. Let's just get some hype about it. Other than that, guys, I'm very sad to say it, but this is it. This is my final review on Doom Patrol. I will be making other Doom Patrol videos, so make sure you stay subscribed to the channel, whether that's video essays, things like where could they go in season 3, what villains could be coming to season 3, so on and so forth. So there's plenty of content I will bring out in the next kind of year until we get Doom Patrol again. So like the video, if you did enjoy it, I would love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Check out my Discord link in the top pinned comment if you want to talk about Doom Patrol with me even more. I do have Twitter, I do have Instagram. It's just /BobaTalks or @BobaTalks. Very easy to find me. But other than that, guys, I don't want to say goodbye. I just want this video to keep going. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see all of you Doom Patrollers in the next video. Goodbye.